Today is November the 10th, 2022. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And with me today is Tammy Johnson, Energy Manager in the Energy Management and Sustainability Department here at OSU, which began in 2007.
Correct.
And I have it that you are one of the original 5 emergency managers, and that the program has led to over $60 million in cost avoidance.
Yes.
I've learned that word on the Stillwater campus. And in 2020, OSU was named to the Green Colleges list by the Princeton Review.
Yes.
We are in the Angie DeBow room in the Edmund Lowe Library and on the OSU campus. And this interview will be a part of the Stories from Oklahoma State University Oral History Collection. And we'll focus on the stewardship of energy. So thank you for meeting with me today. Before we get to your work, let's learn a little bit about you. Start wherever you like.
I am the daughter of an OSU grad. I originally went to high school and grew up in Watauga, Oklahoma, in the western part of the state. I graduated from OSU in 2007 with a bachelor's in sociology. I will graduate in a couple weeks from the University of Central Oklahoma with a master's in public administration. I have one child who has graduated from OSU, which would be our 3rd generation. Our family's very proud of that. That's an accomplishment for us. And I currently have a junior in the horticulture department.
Okay, cool. So was your family originally from Oklahoma, or had they migrated here from Texas or wherever?
My dad's grandfather participated in the land run, and he got homesteaded out near Minco, Oklahoma. And my mom's family came from Pennsylvania and Kentucky. My grandmother was the one who immigrated into the state. We've been in the United States a very long time, from what I can tell. But yeah, most of my family's from the Tulsa, Claremore area. They kind of all are in that region of the state. So
you would have gone to high school in Watauga?
I went to high school in Watauga.
Graduated in
1994.
Okay.
Yeah, so forever ago.
And how did you come to choose OSU as because you're
my dad came here to work with the ag management program, and my parents were up here, and my husband got a job opportunity, so we moved up here, and I worked at what is now the School of International Studies, but it was called UEIED, University Extension International and Economic Development at the time. I worked for Dr. Romas, who was the dean, and I worked there for 6 years, and then was encouraged by Dr. Bosterman, David Bosterman. He was VP of Finance, to go back to school, and I did. And when I graduated, he told me, why hadn't I applied for this particular job? And that's how I ended up as an energy manager, because I didn't not qualify for it. I didn't really qualify, or at least I didn't realize, didn't read like I really qualified. But when I went and interviewed, it was really clear that I felt like by the end of the interview that I was pretty certain I really wanted that job. So that was how I ended up there, him goading me into applying. I had a job at the dean's office at what was Human Environmental Sciences at the time lined up. So I was not overly concerned. So yeah, that's how I ended up being an energy manager.
I'm thinking, from sociology to that, what was the crossover?
So the crossover is we do, for as much as we're mechanical and we deal with all the mechanics of a building, probably the most important part of my job is dealing with people every day. So from encouraging them to do maybe things they don't want to do, to figuring out this problem that no one else has really been able to figure out, to assisting researchers with verifying, environmental conditions of their lab that they need for their data, or a problem in the environment of their lab they're not really solving. I gather data for accreditation things sometimes over with VetMed when they need to verify from an outside of their department source to ensure that they're meeting the required environmental conditions. So, we work on that. And so all of that interaction with people becomes a really important part. And that's where the sociology comes in.
Okay. Where was your office initially?
Initially, we officed in Scott Hall, which was a old residence hall. So we essentially each had a dorm room. Which, when we started, we were working 60, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes. I mean, I half lived here, and I've never been so tired in my whole life as the first year of this job, because no one had done it, and you had to figure everything out. You had to convince everybody that this was a good idea. You had to deal with no one knew the answers to the questions you were asking. Like, it hadn't mattered before how this piece ran or why this thing did what it did. So you kind of had to really examine and study and all of those things. And, I have a degree in sociology. I am not an engineer. So I had to learn everything. I had to learn all about chilled water and steam and thermodynamics and how HVAC works and how boilers work and all the things, like the things I know about I would have never expected me to do. I would have expected me to go into either social work, nonprofit work, or into the arts of some sort. Because in my personal life, I cross stitch and quilt and do fiber arts and stuff like that. And that's what I would have expected, not this. And I also wouldn't have expected to like it.
I was going to say, what motivated you to stay on if you were working 70 and 80 hours a week?
Because I love a good challenge.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's always a good thing. Like, I get bored and I need challenged. Casey's who's my current supervisor, is very aware of that. We've worked together for the whole time of the program, and she will hand me a big puzzle and know that I will play with it until I solve it or figure out why I can't fix it. I earned my CEM which is a certified energy manager, through the Association of Energy Engineers. So I got an engineering certification, and that was one of kind of the most surprising things I've done, because that involves a lot of math.
And you passed it the first time.
And I did. I passed it in the first time, which most people don't do. I probably passed it the first time because I was so scared of not passing. But I did it, and I use all that information a lot, but it's not what I would have expected to do. It wasn't even how the program looked at the beginning. I mean, in the beginning, we did a lot more meeting with people. We did a lot more training sessions and things like that. And now we do it more organically. We work on specific areas more, and we've built our contacts, and kind of it looks different.
Well, in the early days, what were some of your challenges?
In the early days, just getting like the facility management people who had been here. At the time, it was called physical plant. They'd been here forever. We were brought in. There was a contract with Energy Education. They're now called Synergistic. But at the time, Bill Spears, who's a OSU alumni, this is his company. He had worked with President Smidley to, bring this program to OSU. And because an outsider was bringing it in, it was really hard to win those guys over, especially, like I came from a dean's office and then school. And so those that did know me were like, you can't do this job. And they were real skeptical, and they didn't want us up in their business, and they didn't want, they felt like it was a criticism of them when it wasn't. At this, we had to build that relationship. We had to create that we're on the same team, and if I find a problem, it's not about who made the problem. Doesn't matter. We just want to fix it. And if you know things, I'm very willing to learn. And so letting them have the chance to be a teacher and finding out that I wasn't there to take this error I found and run up to their boss went a long way. But it took them a little time to relax and become comfortable and do those things. So that was a huge challenge. And then, out in the buildings, people forget. At OSU, we feel like this is a very comfortable place. It's a family. It's our office, our home, our department. And we forget that it's the universities. And there are policies and guidelines. And so when we started saying, well, we want to look at this and we want to look at that, that loss of some of the control of what happened to their space was very hard at first. And I don't blame them. I mean, I had worked at, my office was in the West Watkins Center. That's a building I've had the whole time. And, when I came over and said, guess what? We're not going to run this building 24/7 anymore. It was very hard for them. We had lots of discussions before I could smoothly do it. And sometimes it was, I'm going to prove to you how the building's going to act. But yeah, we had to work through all of that and just the lack of resources for what we do. We had to create a lot of those resources because, zone maps weren't available very well. We had to take the building floor plans and the building automation diagrams and bring them together into something usable so we could really understand the building. We still find equipment occasionally that we didn't know existed. It's not on anybody's radar. We had to do things by hand that is now automated. Just find all the pieces and all the things you need. Even just who is responsible. Excuse me. Just even knowing who's responsible, who handles this thing at the university, who schedules all the classrooms. I mean, the registrar does, and for some people that's really common knowledge. For us, it was not. We had to figure it out. We're not a department scheduling a class, so we didn't know. We had to figure out a way to get that schedule out of their system in a usable way that we could then know what was going on in each space. So a lot of creating resources, a lot of finding them, things that now is just kind of second nature. We struggled with a lot at first.
So was the main aim to save money? I mean, that was the main goal. The
bottom line is just to save money. To reduce the university's utility bill. And, students do care and about how good stewards of our resources we are. And so, it's kind of twofold in that mind. It was a recruiting tool, but it was also just, we're paying too much in utilities. And OSU pays a lot of money, probably, $750,000 to $1 million a month in utility bills. Just on the Stillwater campus. So when you think about reducing that by 10% or 15%, that becomes very tangible money. And in the utility bill, it's not that the university ends up with this pot of money. What happens is it's money we don't have to ask the taxpayers for. So it's not just managing OSU's money well and, using our resources as well as we can and spending money wisely. It's, respecting the taxpayers in the state of Oklahoma. We'd prefer that money, if you don't have to get it for utilities, what else can you use it for? Well, typically for things like, the library or, classes or paying a professor or something, but it didn't have to go to utilities. And it's a significant amount of money.
It doesn't raise tuition. I guess that's maybe come in there too.
Yeah.
Tuition.
It at least doesn't make them have to raise tuition for a utility bill.
So that's why Dr. Bosselman was involved, because it was a money.
Yes, and it fell under Rick Kreshak, the program did, who was the head of the physical plant at the time, and he reported to Dr. Bosselman. But yeah, as a financial piece, he was very much interested in it. Joe Weaver pays very good attention to how the program's doing, and when GU bills get we have somewhere that's kind of gotten out of control, budget and asset management will reach out and say, hey, what's going on here? This is really a lot. And a lot of times we have an answer, but sometimes it's like, I'm working on that. I've got to find it. I don't know yet. But they're paying really close attention to that as well. And it does, we've added a lot of buildings and not had, we went a while without having to increase the utility budget while we added a bunch of buildings. It's not so true now. We've added a lot of buildings since we started, but it's not as much as it would have been. And it's also helped focus certain things within the buildings. We try to encourage better building practices, better design practices, to try to keep the bill down. It doesn't always work, but we're at least part of the conversation, and it's at least being looked at. Sometimes the needs of the building or what they're really wanting, you don't win them all.
Behavior modification is a big part of the puzzle.
Yes, behavior modification is a huge part of the puzzle. We get a lot of the idea that, well, my monitor doesn't even cost a penny to run all night. But when you look at a campus the size of, Stillwater and all of its branch campuses, or I don't know what we're calling those now, but all of their campuses, there's a lot of monitors. That penny or half a penny adds up to a lot of money a night. So the more people you can get turning those small things off and taking personal responsibility for their little space, the more we can reduce our energy consumption. But it also, it's good habits. And one of the things we see a lot too is we get there, we change the culture. So new employees don't even know that this was once not expected of them. We tend to, a lot of new buildings now get really fancy like control systems and sensors and stuff. And we tend to say we don't really want the sensors. We might want them in a hallway where no one has specific control of that space, but we really still want it in the office because we want them to have that responsibility for their light switch, for that behavior. And so, and it's from, it's things we don't even think about. Yes, it's turning off your personal things, but it's also, noticing that the classroom was empty as you walk past and reaching your hand in and turning off the light, or reporting an issue that, hey, there's this light on that won't go off, or there's this lights on, like I reported this morning, there's lights on Hall of Fame that shouldn't be on the street. There's a sensor that's went bad that should have worked. So they need to go work on that. It's, I get calls about different stadium, like especially the tennis stadium, their big screens being on. when they don't think there's anything going on in there. We get calls about irrigation leaks because we have squirrels on campus and they like to eat the irrigation lines. So it's a constant battle. And we get, questions about, how can I save energy over here? Or, we find all these things, even where they schedule a meeting, or how, so one of the things in some of my buildings I will talk about is this idea of these spaces, because they're associated with a lab, are on 24 hours a day for safety reasons. So because they're under that same air handler, I want you to use this conference room first all the time. And then this one would be your second choice if this one's full, so that we don't have to turn on that air handler unless, if that's, unless they don't have another space available. So that matters a lot. And people who do events and stuff here really have a good grasp now. It's not like they reserve all day and they expect HVAC all day. If I have an event on a Saturday, they're like, we're getting there at 8, or we're coming in to set up at 7, and we're going to be there. The event gets over at 5, and I need an hour afterwards. We get, and I need these spaces. So we get really good information that in the past, they would have assumed the whole building would be on all day. They could come and go whenever they wanted. And they don't even realize that we've changed that culture and that behavior. So that also saves a lot of energy, and it helps plan things like custodial. If they're wanting to work on the building maybe on a weekend, because they're scheduling things very clearly now. The FM can reach out and say, they have an event this weekend. Here's your opening, and they can go work on it without disrupting classes or, work time, or if they need to turn the building completely off to fix a valve or something electrical or whatever. They have some clarity on when they can do that.
Well, who communicates that to you? Like if something was in the library, like an event, who's responsible for letting you know that?
So if I had something extra in the library, it would be John DeGeorge.
Well, he would have to tell you.
So he would send me an email or a work order. I'm not real sure yet. I just took it.
Okay.
Like in Willard, I have a person who's responsible for their scheduling, and it comes in through there. If it's in most of the other general university buildings, it comes in through a report from the registrar's office that we run every morning, kind of first thing in the morning. And we have a access program that allows us to see what's new. So we don't have to look at the thousands of events that are in the schedule. And that's also how we look at where the classes are and when they are. So we can match the classroom times up with when they're going to be used for students, so that we run them long enough and we turn them on early enough. If you have a 7:30 class, it needs to be ready at 7:30, not turned on at 7:30. And if they have an evening class that is scheduled to go till 9:30 at night, you want to make sure that unit runs until class is solidly over, because we don't want to negatively impact the learning environment. Our goal isn't to shush people out for the most part, or, make people not be here. It's about using space, with thought and intent.
I guess that comes where your title, energy management.
Yeah, we're managing, we say we're managing the energy, but in a lot of ways we're managing people and all the moving parts.
So was that your title to begin with?
We were an energy educator manager first, which is a mouthful. But when we first started, the program that Bill Spears' program that was brought in, it's modeled after a K through 12 idea. So we were the first university they had brought it into. And that was difficult because what works at a K through 12 that's not open nearly as long, that doesn't have students who can freely come and go as they want, doesn't have research in the level, magnitude, or some of the research we have here is very sensitive. I mean, they just don't, and there's safety issues. They just don't have that. They don't have sporting events of the scale that we do here, or animals that we keep. So there were a lot of things to figure out. And the K through 12 model, the energy manager would spend a lot of time going in and having meetings and classes and sessions with all these teachers. And that's great. It's useful, but we don't have kind of that setup where it's not super, at OSU, if I say everybody from the library has to attend this meeting, that's going to be real problematic because the library still has to function. Every area, we're here to serve the students, and there's not like here we're having training today rather than school. We're not having a professional development day. So there's not as smooth a ways to do that. Sometimes I will have a meeting with staff members, but I'll pick a select group or I'll do it 2 or 3 times. But it has to be pretty important because we're all doing a job. So it's a lot more one-on-one, and it's a lot more focused on the cultural change than it is educating all the time. And honestly, most people don't even realize that cultural change is really pretty well ingrained here.
Getting better, yes.
Yeah, it gets better all the time. Oh, we also have to start over every fall. And I'll also say with COVID, we had to really, really start over because people were away from campus sometimes close to a year and a half. And so they didn't, you forget your habits, you forget what you're supposed to do. It's maybe not your top priority. So we had, I spent, especially at the beginning of this semester, a lot of time going, hey, I have questions. Can you refresh my memory? And really, I was mostly refreshing theirs. But the point isn't to call somebody out. The point is just to kind of bring them back to that behavior. And usually a reminder was all it took. But we all got out of habits. And every freshman class we have to restart on. There's always a new crop of staff members, especially at the start of the year, because they move around, they change, we get new professors, new, support staff. This year we've gotten a new president, we're getting a new provost. New athletic director. There's been a lot of change. And so you kind of have to start all those people all the time. So the process never ends.
So let's back up at like your first week on the job. What were some of the things that you were doing and maybe that surprised you? Or
so the very first day on the job, the contractor, his name was Garrett Self, he took us into the basement of what was the business building, is now GAB, General Academic Building, to look at the air handlers and talk about how they worked. And I really questioned my decision to take the job because it really was overwhelming. It wasn't, this wasn't something I had ever thought about. In that first week, we went into ATRC mechanical rooms. We visited some labs. We had lots of training sessions on things like enthalpy and thermodynamics and all the science that, I'm not bad at science, but it was a lot, and it wasn't an area I had really studied before. So we always say, when you start with the program, it's like drinking from the fire hose. So that first week, I think 3 of the days I came to work at 4 a.m. because there are places you can't go when staff is here because you're disrupting class or you're disrupting work, especially not for what you're doing. And we spend a lot of time, nights and weekends here even now. But then, I mean, we were there very long hours just trying to learn. I think I even met with a couple of the buildings I ended up being assigned with to start introducing the idea of the program to them. But yeah, lots and lots and lots of information.
How were you taking notes?
I still
taking notes.
I still have the notebooks from that time, and one of my 3-ring, spiral notebooks, it was about 40 days worth of notes. And then I have references to websites and then training guides all throughout. And I'm not normally a real I keep notes, but they're usually like some odd shorthand of reminders more than a note. And this is very detailed with drawings and arrows and colored, I colored pieces of it. When we started the job, one of the things Casey and I both talk about is this idea that for the first year, you could say a lot of times, what did you do at work today? I colored. Because you were taking these maps and creating maps of the building that were useful for what we were doing. Who's in this space and how does this space work? And it was information that at the time, the building was built and they didn't really know. I mean, it didn't really matter to anybody else. So yeah, we colored a lot. I mean, I bought really nice colored pencils early on.
And you kept some of those or most of them?
I still have all of those drawings. They're all digitized now, but I still have them all because they're still very useful. So yeah, I mean, I think when I started that the first week too. And shortly thereafter, probably second or third week, we started building our database. We use a software program called EnergyCap, which has evolved greatly. We have redone it about 3 times, done major upgrades and redesign of how our stuff goes in the database about 3 times. But we had to enter that first 5 or 6 years of data so that we had enough to know what we were doing by hand. And Casey and I entered every building from ledger pages for 2 or 3 hours every day for months, just to get all the data in the database. Because if you don't know what you're doing, without measuring it, you can't know if you've done anything or when there's a problem. So yeah, that was a very early on task too, of creating that database and putting all that data in by hand. Now the meter readers who work for utility distribution, they have an app and they enter them directly into the database through the app. So it really simplifies the process.
Yeah, how often do you have to look at that now? Every morning or?
So we have a process. So about the last couple days of the month and the first day or 2 of the month, it takes the meter readers about 5 days to read meters at this point. It took them longer early on. They had carried big books and things weren't as clear. We now have routes designed and they work very closely with us to get those right in the system and, help. They're very good at communicating with us what they need to help that be smooth. And the database has a lot of capabilities to do that now, which we appreciate. But so currently what happens is they read the meters. Then we do an initial bill creation, which makes it do all this calculation of how much the bills are for this month for that read period. And it kind of gives us something to work with. And the database runs an audit on all of those potential bills. And that audit tells us if they're, for the most of them, 20% less or 20% more than the same month last year. It's a starting place to kind of look. So those that fail the audit, we go through by hand and we look at every bill and we see, does it need a reread? Do we need to go figure out what's going on with the building? Do we need to, ask what's going on? We know there's something going on over there. Do we need to turn in a work order to get somebody to go fix something? Kind of all of those things. So it gives us a good starting point for which buildings need attention. There's only, Casey is an energy manager, but she also oversees sustainability, and she oversees the automation systems group. So she's not really running around buildings anymore. So there's really only 4 of us running around every building that's considered part of OSU Stillwater. So that's not just the on-campus stuff, but it's the museum, it's the farms, it's Lake Carl Blackwell, it's all the pieces. So that kind of informs our activities. And so in my case, typically after I've done the audit, I will meet with vet med and I will meet with athletics and say, here's all the problem areas. What do you know about these spaces for this last month? Okay, so we've got these eliminated. And then we start working on those problems. In my general university buildings, it's a little more hands-on. So say it's Willard. I will start trying to look and see, does it have something that's running when it's not supposed to? Does it have a window open? Does it have a piece of equipment that's malfunctioning? Are we just running it a lot more because we've had a lot of events this month? Is it, did the meter read correctly? All those things, and start trying to figure that out and go visit the building and see, talk to, if it's a certain area that I can nail it down to. Okay, so what's going on over here? And I'll kind of go poke my head in whoever's available and say, hey, I'm kind of seeing this. What do you know? And it's a good way to check in. But, we do that. And then by the end of the month, we'll bill either the general university or those auxiliary units that pay their own bills. We will bill all of them. And then we literally start right over. So it's a big part of our process, but it both feeds where we focus the problem part of our workload and where we need to, really give attention to. The scheduling part is like a daily activity. And then, you also have requests. Bobby picked up loggers here today because there had been a request to look at the humidity levels in this area because from what I understand, there's going to be some fragile documents come in. So they wanted to kind of know what the conditions actually look like so we can protect those. That kind, we do a lot of special requests that don't fit anything else. And we get asked random things. We're good at figuring out how to put together resources on campus because we're kind of a bridge between FM and the buildings because we work more in them than, say, a controls tech. They're going to come over, they're going to work with their thing and walk away. And they may not know. They may have one contact in a building, and we probably will have, in the library, I'll have many. In Willard, I probably have 40 or 50 people that I would consider a contact at this point after having it for 7-8 years.
Well, then let's back up and see what buildings you had to begin with.
So I started out with all of the ag buildings, the human and environmental sciences buildings. I've had Whitehurst, Alumni Center, and West Watkins since the beginning. I think that was my initial buildings for the most part. And I had those for probably the first 5 years, maybe. We tend to give ag to the new people, which ag has a lot of diversity within it. It also, the buildings, it has some labs, but the buildings are also fairly straightforward as far as design. while they have labs and they have things that are very important, they're not, special grand pianos or, priceless artwork or, that kind of fussy stuff that is very different and unique to a situation. So it's a really good spot. There's great people to work with over there. There's kind of every kind of system over there. There's a variety of labs. There's a lot of good people who will answer questions and be happy to give them a few minutes of their time to really tell them, this is how I use this space, or this is what, is going on, and you have the opportunity to really learn kind of all of the basics over there. So when Dennis retired, I gave up ag, and that went to Bobby or Steven, and I don't know. Maybe it went to Steven first. I can't remember anymore. I think it went to Steven first. And I took over athletics at that point, which is an adventure because there's so many moving parts. The teams come and go. There's so many athletes. There's huge influx of people into all those spaces. It's a lot.
and new facilities and remodeled facilities.
Yes, and they're constantly remodeling, upgrading, trying to make sure our athletes have really great facilities and places to train and really the best experience as a student athlete, within campus and that kind of thing. So it's a constant, they're never still over there. But it's also really fun because you meet really neat people, you really neat students.
Is the gym ever completely off?
Very rarely. Very rarely. The best chance they're off is if both teams are traveling and wrestling. Okay. That's kind of the way to get like the arena all off, because the players come in. I can't sleep. They're in there practicing layups or free throws or whatever. They're there a lot. I don't think I've ever walked through Gallagher-Iba and not found somebody there. And the stadium's a little different story. If football is gone there and the facility people who office in the basement are gone, there won't be a soul in that building. The most dead that all of it becomes is like if OSU's at a bowl game and we don't have any basketball stuff going on at that point. It can get really dead, like over right about the first of the year. It's still never completely still.
When do you find problems then if you can't ever get into it by yourself?
I find them. It takes some doing. A lot of times when the teams are away traveling, that's my best opportunity, and I'll poke my head in and try to figure it out. And sometimes I'll request, I need to see if this will go off. I'm going to tell you I'm going to turn it off. And they'll kind of let people know it might go off. It's on purpose. And truthfully, if you turn something off for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, nobody necessarily, they might hear the sound, but the building doesn't change how it feels. Obviously, we wouldn't do it during like a big game or something like that, but I have attended, kind of a lot of the different sports once or twice while the game is in session to kind of see the startup and close down of, say the arena or the tennis facility or that kind of thing. Just what are we doing to start it up and what are we doing to close it down? And how does that compare to what I'm seeing within the data? And athletics, there's, just because it's the football team or it's the basketball team, it doesn't mean that the only practice they have is when the whole team gets together. They might watch film, they might get together for some specific training, or they might be going in to see a trainer, or they're going into the gym to lift weights and do conditioning, or, there's a ton of reasons they might be having to be over in those facilities during the day. So yeah, we work really hard to work around them. Sometimes I will say, okay, you're having big track practice right now. Just let them know that I'm going to be visiting the dressing room while they're out, because that's the most empty time I can find where I know that I can enter a space, and then you knock and you yell. And, especially if I'm like, because I'm a woman entering a men's dressing room, I'm going to yell, and I might bring one of the other energy managers with me who's a guy to stick their head in the door, because the last thing I want to do is open the door. I don't want to find things I don't want to find like that, and they don't deserve that interruption, and it's just not appropriate. So we work really hard at that. I've drug Stephen and Bobby around a number of times to knock on dressing room doors when I need to work on things. I have a couple of meters that are actually tucked in behind a dressing room, so you have to go into a dressing room. It's always a men's dressing room. It's always a men's dressing room that is tucked in. So we work together in that way. But yeah, athletics is an interesting batch. West Watkins was one of the biggest early challenges, and it's one of our, especially for me, it's one of my biggest successes. Because that building ran 24/7. It has, some days it has, 500 or 600 people in it. Some days it just has the staff in it. But it changes every single day. Now we have classes in it most days of the week in the auditorium. Usually they're like freshman gen ed courses over there, like history or something like that. So we have to accommodate that too. But we were able to really get a hold of the humidity, figure out how early we have to turn each thing on to have it ready for the event, how to make the event comfortable. That's especially important in big spaces like the exhibit hall over there or the auditorium, where you have huge influxes of people in and out. We've learned how to do that really well, and I've learned how to work with staff so that they understand what I need from them and give them words to tell people. I mean, we have a running joke about, if the person telling you that it's too hot is the person running around taking care of all the stuff, you need to ask somebody else if it's actually hot. Because, they've been working really hard and they're concerned about their event and their people. But if you're the one running around, we've often had them say, it's super hot. But the people in the space sitting down are freezing to death. And so we talk about that a lot. Just don't, go in and ask some questions, go check. Or, and I've had them even say, I need you to sit down for 5 minutes and we'll see if it's still hot. And that works. I mean, but it was something we had to learn, and we had to give them the language, so that they weren't going, I'm just ignoring you. That's not what they're doing. But that person doesn't always know what it's really like. And, if they say the event's hot, it takes a few minutes for the room to stabilize. Give it 5 minutes and then check again.
Lots of things to learn and
to
consider. Do you have a checklist?
I should. I don't.
Oh, I know. It's mental,
it's very mental. Every building kind of probably should. It's probably something we need to think about. I do have a scheduling checklist, like for Watkins, where if we're having an event over there, you must turn on this air handler because it runs the bathrooms. That's an important detail. And, you also need to run this other air handler because it covers this other side of the hallway, and the exhibit hall takes an hour longer than, say, the front hallway to get to temp and get comfortable. So, that stuff, I do have like a cheat sheet for when somebody's covering for me of,
Kind
this
of
happens.
Substitute teacher.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Yeah, like it's just like it's a couple pages out of a notebook that I've scanned into the database, scanned into the cloud, but it gives them the pieces so they're not having to figure it out. And for the most part, we kind of each have that for the buildings. Some of them are really straightforward, you know.
They have their own personalities, it sounds like.
Each building has their own personalities, their own quirks, their own unique problems.
Which one's been the biggest challenge of the ones you?
OADDL, the Oklahoma Disease Diagnostics Lab.
I'm not even sure where that is.
So that's part of Vet Med, and it's over on Farm Road, across the street from the teaching hospital.
Okay.
And it's a lab building that gets samples from all over the United States to test for things like bird flu, various diseases in animals. I mean, they have the capability to test for very scary things and all the run-of-the-mill things that animals, that vets are seeing. They also got accredited during COVID to do human testing. We did all that initial early COVID testing there. So it has that kind of ability. But the people are great over there. They're amazing to work with, but we had a humidity problem that I've had that space for about 7 years now. And it took us 7 years to solve it. They have somebody doing the work to fix the problem right now. So, but it took a really long time to figure out why the building would be so wet. You'd be so humid that it could rain in the building. Like things would drip off of hoods and things in these very, there's lots of stainless steel and lots of very cleanable surfaces. And so they tend to be cooler and you get lots of condensation. I worked on that for a very long time, and we asked the right question and we finally found the answer. And it's requiring quite a bit of work, but the building will be better for it, and all of the occupants who work there will be much happier when it's done. It will save them a lot of money because they do pay their own bills. But it will be a really good thing when it's done. But yeah, that building has been my biggest challenge, trying to figure out why we were having so much humidity drug into the building and why we couldn't get it out.
You want to share the solution? If it's understandable.
So you have a big air handler, which is kind of like your household heating and air unit, but this is like the size of a room. And it pumps air to VAV units, which are variable air volume units that provide the individual spaces, heating and air. So somewhere in time, the preventative maintenance on the coils that are within those VAV boxes that heat and cool the air before it goes into the space had gotten forgotten. And so the coils were incredibly dirty and impacted, and air wasn't moving over those coils correctly. And it wasn't heating or cooling the air effectively at all. And because it wasn't doing that, it wasn't bringing the humidity, the moisture out of the air. So like at your home, you have a line that drips outside of your home that drips condensate from your unit. We have spaces that are, look like a water hose all the time running, pulling humidity out of the air. In this case, all these little units weren't doing their job effectively. So it took a while to realize that they weren't, like when you looked on the surface, they were working correctly. They were doing their job. But it took having somebody come in and take it apart, which is not an easy, it's not an everyday thing to find the problem. So they're literally having to come in, take each, go up in the ceiling, remove ceiling, the drop down tiles, pull all this out, take the coil outside, clean the coil with special chemicals, and then put it back in. It's like a whole process. I think they're cleaning about a coil a day. So this isn't fast, but we're about halfway through in last month's data, and we've seen about a 40% reduction in utility costs in chilled water over there. And we're definitely seeing better comfort and less noise from the air handling unit, which means it's putting air in the rooms better. So those that have been repaired are doing a lot better. But it was, I had brought engineers over there. I had quizzed people at professional conferences. I had done all kinds of logging and testing, and it wasn't obvious in any of the data that was available to find it. So yeah, but it's a big deal for them.
I'm thinking if you hadn't solved it, then you would just have to get a whole new unit.
Well,
which is expensive.
yeah, and some units, if the coil gets impacted like that, that's literally what happens. And that was very, one of the fears Vet Med had was they were going to have to spend even more money to just replace the units. And it would mean a lot more downtime and a lot more disruption to the people working in the labs and not being able to fulfill, their obligations to people who rely on them for this testing. So it was a big concern, but they brought in a contractor because it's such a big job, and were able to figure out a solution to actually just repair, which was huge.
So now they'll have to get that in their rotation to.
Yes, they have put it.
Maintain.
Yeah, they have put paying attention to those coils into their preventative maintenance program. It is documented and up to date, and that's one of their current big pushes is this upgrading and updating and changing how they do preventative maintenance.
So maybe in a few years you'll reach the $1 million savings. Whatever you do.
Even that, Odell did that a few years ago. Even with all their problems, they still avoided that amount of money probably 5 or 6 years ago. So they were a fairly early building to achieve that.
So several of yours, I was reading, have that.
Several of mine have.
Including West Watkins.
West Watkins was really my first one. They're at about $2.5 million overall now. Odell, McElroy Hall, FAPC got it the year after I was no longer the energy manager over there. So they made a lot of progress. The Alumni Center, Gallagher, Iba, and Boone Pickens.
Those are big.
Those are all big and have done it very well. But it wasn't easy. It took a lot of, not just myself, but there's a lot of people you work with who really do this. And we talk a lot about, we're trying to manage, we're trying to steer the ship a little bit, but they're really doing most of the work. It doesn't work unless they buy in and they participate. Athletics, especially after 2015, has made a significant push to really focus on keeping their bills down and being aware of what resources they're putting into these buildings. So, trying to water efficiently, trying to, schedule efficiently, trying to figure out how to make game day not quite so resource intensive. There's been some, various changes that can be made without a huge capital outlay to try to do those things. They have recycling and, at the stadium, and they pay a lot of attention to, when do they need to turn on the stadium? When are people going to be entering? How do we, run the suites more efficiently? There's so many windows on the suites and club level that those spaces are really hard to manage. So how do you manage them so they're comfortable and they have the best game day experience for those that have purchased either those tickets or those suites? you want the best experience for people to come. And we want, especially people who only get to go up there once in a while or one time, you want it to be this great experience. You want them to experience the best of OSU. And on game day, there's so many great things. One of them, it is really neat to go watch the football game from the club level and, socialize and see and do all those things and really see how nice our stadium is. But managing that space is hard, and it requires a lot of forethought. And, that's one of the things I've worked very closely with them on is, how do we, when do we turn them on? How do we keep them from getting damaged when the temperature's, super high or super cold? How do we protect this huge asset? How do we ensure, the game day experience, that they don't come in and it's not miserable up there because it's 100 outside and we've got a complete wall of windows on two sides for the most part. So that's an important, thing they work very hard on. And even, the irrigation is a huge one. When they put in track and baseball and the soccer fields, those fields are very specialized. They're not just here's some dirt and some grass. There's all kinds of layers of substrate that help it be the right, bounciness, or, there's very big standards for that. But they put a lot of thought into how are we going to irrigate this so that we irrigate it well. We don't waste water, and we take care of our field the best. So there's some really neat irrigation going on in those facilities as they've planned it.
You've had to learn that.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Kyle Waters is the head of facilities for athletics, and he is a turf guy. And so he spent a lot of time early on, like when we were getting, they were getting ready to get soccer turned over to them. Well, this is how this field was created, and this is what it means for how the water moves and how much it's going to have to irrigate, all of that stuff. So that was a really useful lesson, because otherwise you're like looking at this irrigation chart and you're like, it's dry outside. But sometimes that's not, like, athletics stuff doesn't always follow the trend of the rest of campus, because the way they irrigate and when they irrigate and how they irrigate are very different. Their whole purpose is different than having a very beautiful campus.
They have their own line, budget line or whatever, too, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they pay really good attention to it, and they really want the fields to be amazing fields for our athletes. And it also plays, a good field plays into their safety. And so that makes it even more important that it's just pretty. It meets those standards to keep our athletes as safe as possible.
What happened in 2015 for them to want to do this?
They got a new director of facilities, and I took over the building maybe a year or 2 years. I took over athletics a year or 2 years before that. I can't remember quite how long. And was really finding some really big issues over there, and spent a lot of time kind of documenting and kind of coming up with numbers and putting pen to paper. And when Kyle came in, they decided that needed to be a focus. So they helped support him in that goal, which helped get it moving in the right direction to really do a lot over there. Because, I mean, without support of the AD, without support of administration, it's really hard to tell coaches, we're going to change how we do things, or we're going to move this around, or you're going to have to tell me your schedule. I mean, that's a very hard thing to do. And so I don't know that the current coaches, especially those that are new, even know that there's any other way to do business over here. But early on, it was a real challenge, and it took a lot of support from the AD and from, administration as a whole to make that happen. And it wasn't that they weren't participating before, they were, and they were doing stuff, but they just added more focus, so it allowed for bigger muscle movements over there.
I'm thinking you have a master key to a lot of buildings on campus, don't you?
I do. There's very few that I can't just get into. I don't do that though unless they're mine or I'm covering for somebody. Otherwise, I ask the energy manager to take, who's assigned, because every building is assigned to somebody to take me on a tour, or if I'm really curious.
Can you, any hours of the day at night or wee hours of the morning, do you go by yourself?
Yeah, I usually do. It's according to where I'm at. Sometimes I'll call the police dispatch and say, hey, I'm going to be in Whitehurst and they're going to see lights come on and off, and it's 4 in the morning or 10 or 11 at night based on what I'm looking for. Just, heads up. Especially like Whitehurst has alarms, and once in a while you forget or they're not labeled as well as they should. I've set off an alarm or two. That way they know you're there and you can call and say, hey, oops, somebody needs to come shut this off. And I'm here. So when the police come, they know I'm there. But that's always been a really good experience. They know what's going on. They know we're here. But I do, kind of according to where I'm at, we'll say, hey, especially Whitehurst, we'll say that I'm present. But yeah, I will wander around. The only building I really won't wander around in the middle of the night by myself is the stadium, and that's because you can't turn on the lights. It requires a system that is not one I just can access easily. I also don't want to turn on the whole stadium.
No, you'd get lots of calls if you did.
Yeah, I would. And it would really defeat the purpose of, if I turned it on, that's money I'm spending. So I don't run around in it in the middle of the night. But the one thing about the stadium is, if we have a game on a Saturday, I can go run around on a Sunday and do what I need to do. Because for the most part, other than maybe the coaches getting ready for next week already, and the conditioning area and stuff, it's pretty vacant. So I can still do my job there. But yeah, I'm up here evenings, weekends, holidays. I won't necessarily be here Thanksgiving Day. I can promise I will be here Friday. My ELA groups, my Energy Leadership Award groups, all know I will pretty well come and audit over Thanksgiving weekend their spaces, because I appreciate not having to come in the middle of the night to do it. So I give them a few hours there, and it means I don't have to turn on lights, and I don't have to just be as tired. So that's a nice thing. But yeah, I wander around campus a lot in the middle of the night. I have a lot of people ask me if I feel unsafe, and I've never felt unsafe on campus. That's one of the really great things about our campus is, maybe if I was my daughter's age and in my early 20s, I might feel differently. But my experience on campus has always been, anybody I ran into in the middle of the night was as shocked as I was. And that they're here for an education. They don't have malicious intent. One of my favorite stories is about 7 or 8 years ago, I tripped out on campus. I tripped over something somebody had dropped on a sidewalk, and I wasn't paying attention. And I fell, and I will say about 5 guys that were right beside me stopped, made sure I was okay, helped me pick up my stuff. We're very concerned. That's my experience on campus with our students. We have amazing students. And when I walk through buildings late and they're still there studying and stuff, and I say, hey, when you're getting ready to leave, will you make sure and turn off the light because there's not other people here? They're very receptive of that. They're perfectly happy to do their part if they know what it is. One of the things we've done is we've added on a lot of the switch plates, especially in classrooms, is, this thing that OSU Bring in Management design that says turn it off, and it's branded and everything. it's a way to give them permission, because they don't always know, can I touch this light switch? Can I touch these things? Am I the last one? Do I know? So the permission actually helps them. Just that concept of OSU really does want this off. And it's bright and friendly. On a lot of classrooms, there's an old, it looks like a 1950s desk sign that says, please turn off the lights as you leave. So it's like brown and it has white writing, it's like engraved in this plastic. I don't think students or professors, either one, even notice that exists at this point, but they do notice the brightly colored branded switch plates.
Yeah.
So that is a really good way to engage the students. And they, students they're a lot more willing to do what is asked than you would guess. They're very minded at this point.
Has that changed much since the beginning, since 2007, or has that always been the case?
They've always been pretty willing. Students are pretty, one, they've always been told what to do, but two, they're always a little more focused on some of those ideas because of their age, because of what they're seeing. But as we've gotten closer to now, they're more asking bigger questions. Where do we get our energy from? How, do we, what specifically do we do to reduce, our energy consumption? How are we preserving water? Bigger, more specific questions. And they're very aware. And some of them are incredibly passionate about certain areas of sustainability. And so you get tough questions sometimes. And they're really great to have that, because it really makes you think, well, what are we doing? Or could we be doing more? Or sometimes they'll, one of my favorite things is I occasionally will get a news article or a research piece that a student will send and say, are we doing any of this? Well, no, we didn't know about that, but that is really cool. Let me research that some more. A lot of times I can't apply it yet, but it does put it on my radar. It does make me think about it. And when we can apply it, or when I can get to that point, it was super useful. But a lot of times that stuff that's still in the research phase, we can't even access. And one thing I don't think students or staff or faculty really understand is these units that are in these buildings, they can be here. I mean, I have units, I even think in the library, but I know at PIO that are 60 years old or older. Ancient equipment, and they're still working, and replacing them is, it's not a few $1,000s like your house. It's a few $1 million to replace. Some of them are literally built into the building. So, to change Whitehurst HVAC out, you would have to remove the roof to do it well, because it was literally built up in that attic when they did the renovation to add air conditioning. It didn't originally have heating and air. Yeah, they used cross ventilation and a boiler down in the basement to heat the building. So yeah, and I would assume it probably didn't, because you would use cross ventilation. I would assume that when you got to the second floor, it wasn't like, here's these suites that are closed off, or when you got, any of those floors, that it would have to have been a lot more open to work properly. I've never seen pictures of where I can tell. I've seen a few ancient pictures of Whitehurst from when it was first built.
Was it a dorm first? Or was it always an admin?
I think it was always an admin, but I am not 100% positive. I know Willard was a dorm first. I know Bartlett was a dorm. I think Thatcher probably was. There's a few others.
And I think if I'm not wrong, the library was the first one that was air conditioned
I think so,
on
yes.
campus, and that was in the 50s. So.
Yeah, and that's what I had been told by a couple of people who have since retired, but were like working here during that time. That was how I understood it. And Whitehurst came shortly thereafter, but the library was the first, and for good reason. I mean, it protects the stuff that's in the building, and it's a mass. I mean, it wasn't as big as it is now, but it was even then a massive building, and it wasn't. You know, do you really want the windows open for your papers to blow away and all the stuff to come in on your books? And it was good for the building.
Well, then the student union's even bigger, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is bigger.
The student union is bigger. I don't know that it always was. I don't remember quite how it compared, but I know at least since the last 2 renovations, it's been bigger. But I think the library, they had that whole north addition back in, I think, the 70s. So, and that was a significant addition to the building.
So you don't have the student union now? Not yet.
I've never had it. I am kind of glad. It's a big, massive building with a lot of parts too. Stephen has it, and I'll let him keep it for a while. I'd have to give something up to take it on because it's just so big with so many different functions.
So part of your piece then, do you do dorms or?
I don't. I have in the past. I did res halls in the past, but currently the reason I took over the library is because Bobby is doing all of residential life, and we have asked him or tasked him with really putting a new renewed focus on them and trying to create some better processes to move them to their next level, because they've done a lot. I mean, I had them before I had vet med. That was what I gave up to take vet med. It's a huge undertaking, and you know, people think they're vacant various times of the year, and they're really not. We have some students that are here year round, and if we're in the summer, we bring in, you know, lots of camps and different, you know, educational opportunities where maybe a group's come in from some country to specifically, you know, do something with the College of Ag, and they're here for 6 weeks or whatever, and they stay in the dorms. And we have some scholar programs that happen. And, you know, if they're not doing that, we're fixing things, you know, because you want to repair, you want to keep them nice, they have to be deep cleaned. I mean, it's an always moving thing. So that's Bobby's new challenge. and it's a good one for him. He's going to do great.
I like to work with students. So too, like when they go home for Thanksgiving or for the holidays or whatever, and remind them to.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like us, but we also, for them, we have more control over their space. So, you know, while you can't set a thermostat in your space to determine the temperature, they can to a point. I mean, I think a lot of them now are converted to where they have a range, so they can't freeze the room out and damage the coil or
the
that kind of thing.
System they talk about, they can't go in and just say, "We're going to do all these units at the same."
No, I wish we could. For Res Life, though, that would be a massive expense and pretty unpopular with the parents, and that does drive some of those decisions. Parents really do. It's a process for parents to let go of their kids and get okay with not handling things for them. I don't think, you know, I've only had a couple of instances where I've ended up with parents figuring out how to contact me, but I know they contact Res Life all the time for, you know, temperature issues and, you know, roommate issues, and roommates don't always agree. So unless you're one of the old style dorms like Wentz Hall, I mean, that one is one temperature. It's controlled by a very ancient setup. But unless you're one of those, that's not how that works. And honestly, I think the ones that kind of limit your temperature range are really a good compromise to keep everybody happy. I mean, if your room's on the corner and it gets more sunlight than this room in the middle, this temperature might need to be set differently than the one in the middle to get the same level of comfort. So I do think there's some value there. But yeah, it's a whole process. And they don't, we don't have any way of knowing everybody in this area went home and they stayed gone. They're not coming back because they can come back, if say we're on winter break, they might only go home for like Christmas Day, and they might come back because they're working after that, or they may not leave at all because they're an international student who doesn't really have anywhere to go. So they're still here on campus all of winter break. So that complicates it too. You don't want to be turning things off on students that don't have anywhere else to go.
Well, they don't get individual utility bills, do they?
They don't. They don't. It would be nice.
Well, I mean, that's why I guess the range is.
The range helps, and it protects the equipment, and it keeps from creating situations as much where the room gets really humid and wet, and creates the place for things to grow. We have enough issues with just that you would have in any other facility like that. We don't need to increase them or encourage them, but it's a process. I think the newer dorms have some really neat technologies in them that from what I can tell from the students I've talked to, they're more comfortable, they're more pleasant because technology's come a long way. But yeah, I mean, in those spaces, the expense of upgrading that kind of stuff is, so big because you're 60, 80, 120 rooms to upgrade. So you can only, that capital outlay is so hard to do.
Your spreadsheet's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, you have stuff break and you have things that need addressed and, things leak and just general, this has been in use and it needs maintenance. So they're constantly, dealing with all of those issues. So that also kind of, if you have a shower that's leaking, that's got to get fixed. It can't wait. Or you've got a window that's won't close, or, just all of the general lived in maintenance-y stuff. And then you add, students who are just out of their house for the first time. They don't always know how to take care. I don't know how many students, whenever I had Res Life, I taught how to deal with their blinds and how a thermostat actually works. And a lot of them would say things like, well, I was never allowed to touch these things in my home. My parents, I was against the rules. And I remember thinking with my kids, I probably ought to teach them because my kids weren't allowed to mess with the thermostat. That was a big no-no. Yeah, I mean, I didn't care about the blinds so much.
And they go up in the winter and down or is it the other way?
It's the other way, but we tell everybody just to turn the slats up because in the big buildings we have here on campus, the heat gain in the summer is really big, but the heat gain that might be beneficial in the winter is so small that rather than try to teach them two different things to do with the blinds, we just turn the blinds up and make it simple. And even in the winter, I mean, Oklahoma we get cold, but we don't stay cold for, like they do up north. So we might have 60 degrees. We don't necessarily need heat gain all the time when we already have the heaters running, when it's a, really nice day in December. So the winter isn't as a clear, it isn't as straightforward in Oklahoma. So we tend to just make it simple and say, turn the blinds up.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some other simple things that we should
Well,
we should be doing?
when you leave at the end of the day,
Flip off the switch.
flip off the light switch, turn off your computer monitor, turn off if you have a printer or speakers or lamp or all kinds of things. People bring all kinds of things in their office or have all kinds of unique equipment. If it can be turned off, it should be fully turned off, not just asleep. Asleep is still pulling some energy. Unplug your chargers if you're not having something plugged into it to charge. Because especially older chargers are still pulling juice the whole time. There's nothing to stop them from doing that job. And that's why they're hot, especially when they don't have anywhere to do with that energy that they're converting. So you want to unplug those. Don't open the windows. When the universe, when the heating and air is on, even when it's off, don't open the windows because it brings in allergens, it brings in humidity. Some of these windows, if the humidity changes, you just about won't get them closed. You're not necessarily being a good neighbor to the other people in your area because it doesn't just control your office or your suite. It might control 2 or 3 suites or 10 offices. And the thermostat might be in your office or close by, and you're affecting what that whole unit's doing for everybody else. So you're being comfortable in that way, but it's not benefiting the others. So I know one of my big themes is be a good neighbor because people don't realize the impact they're having on other people. Nobody wants to be a bad neighbor. But yeah, that's a big one. Don't open the windows unless you have to get out.
I don't know. I don't even think these do open.
A lot of them don't, especially on the older buildings, because a lot of times there's a window over a window. Rather than taking the old windows out, they've just added a window on top.
Like a storm window.
Yeah, like a storm window, yeah. And so there's a lot of that. And some of them, because you can't get them closed again, they've forced shut because we don't want to. If you can't get it, you have to call a carpenter to close the window. We've got a problem. But yeah, and allergens is a big deal too. For some people, it's really important that it's went through the HVAC system before it comes in so that it's pulled out some of those allergens and then they can be more comfortable. But yeah, be a good neighbor.
We all need to know what you know.
Yeah.
We
try.
Do you some of this carry over to home?
Oh, yeah. OG&E's come and checked my meter a few times because I do really well parts of the year. I don't do so hot when it's 100 outside because my husband's an electrician who's been outside all day and he has no plans to come in and be miserable. And I get it.
So they come to you ask to see why it's so low?
Yeah, like in the winter it'll get really low because I use my windows effectively for lighting. I've done things like, weatherized my windows. We've added insulation. We've got an instant heat hot water heater now instead of something that's keeping the water hot all the time. I've upgraded all my lighting and my fans. I don't run parts of my house, because we're not there. I have a programmable thermostat and I use it, and so I don't match the profile of the rest of my neighborhood at all. Though there's a couple people who are starting to get close that are friends of ours that I've kind of like, why are you paying so much? You have a programmable thermostat. But yeah, and even like timers on Christmas lights and
how do you do your microwave? That means you can unplug it.
I don't.
That light's always on.
Yeah, it's always on. That's one of those like base loads that you can't get rid of. I did pay attention to Energy Star when I bought a new one when my other one had died. And like on my husband's gaming system and our TV and stuff, I have a smart surge protector that notes when stuff really isn't on. It's just drawing base energy and it turns those plugs off. So like I have my router plugged into one that won't do that, and then the others, because you don't want the internet to go down, that kind of thing. And just it's just Darren and I at home now. My kids are, my youngest is in college and my older two have their own homes. So, there's not a lot going on.
It's common sense, isn't it? Sometimes I can just hear my dad would used to say, don't let all the hot air out.
Yes. I will tell my kids to not throw basketballs outside. And because a CFM, a cubic foot of air is about the size of a basketball. And so every time you open the door, every one of those can just fly outside, so you're throwing basketballs out. So if you think of it like that, that's a lot of air, a lot of those cubic foots that can go out really quickly. It's a reason not to leave doors wide open. Like, don't stand in the door and talk to a building, like when you're going in and out of a building, go either in the building or step back and let the door shut, because there's a lot of basketballs of air going out there, and a CFM is expensive. You paid for that cool air. So yeah. And the same thing at that med about not leaving the barn doors open. We joke, were you born in a barn? But it's also, don't leave the barn doors open because you're letting all of the heating and air out that was there. Yeah, and the hot in, and now you have to work in it because it takes a while to undo that. But yeah, I've mentioned to a lot of students, hey, either in or out. My parents would say that to me too. Either in the house or out of the house. Quit running in and out. It's kind of the same. Yeah, and it seems like common sense, but it's really about habits. I think the hardest thing for people to turn off on all of campus is their computer monitor. When we're doing the ELA program, that is the reason that they won't pass their first or second audit, is because turning off those monitors, you turned off your computer, the monitors go black, but the monitor's still technically on. It's just not getting any information. So, but you think it's black, it's off. And so that is the hardest thing for people to remember to do. And it's really hard to get in the habit.
ELA?
Energy Leadership Award.
Tell a little bit about that.
So that is an award we give to departments. They can choose to participate, and when they do this award, every staff member or member of a student group, whoever it is, has to do a training, which is kind of all the things we've talked about, but it's done, it's like a 15-minute presentation, and then they do a little quiz. It's just to make sure they've heard all the pieces, and then we work on those really good refining their habits. So we've told them what they need to do, and then as a department, they have to take advantage of 90% of their opportunities to conserve energy. So if they can't reach that 90%, or they miss, another way to say it is they miss 10% of their opportunities, then we do it again. And we'll do it over and over and over again till they get it. So I'll come in on a weekend. Usually I come in on a weekend to do it. And I will go desk to desk to desk, office to office. And I will leave these little cards that either, if it's turned up and I've checked the back and initialed it, it's got Pistol Pete that says, thank you for conserving energy. On the other side, it has a reminder list of what they forgot. And it's a reminder. It's not meant to be a reprimand. It's a, hey, don't forget your monitors next time. And departments who do that, who participate, they really ingrain those habits very well. OADDL is one that does it.
I don't think we do.
You don't?
Not yet.
Not yet. I think we're going to get y'all to do it. I have Alumni Center that does it. West Watkins Center does it. the graduate college. Bobby has FM who's done it. He's got a couple more places, and I can't remember who those are. But we've had some groups. Athletics ticket office is getting ready to kick off.
What do they get if they achieve this?
So they get public recognition over homecoming. We put it out there on A-frames and things, and we asked for them to be at especially busy places near walk-around. So alumni and people get to see it. They get to put on either the door to their suite or the door to their building based on where they're at. They get stickers that have the year and that they're a winner. They get to add it to their publicity and promotional material in their website. We have a piece that you can add to that showing that they're a winner. And, at OSU, we have to report our conservation efforts as part of the budget process. So they also get to talk about that there as well. That was pointed out to me by a dean's office a couple weeks ago. Who said, "Yeah, I think we're going to do it because I want to be able to report that at budget." I thought, "Oh, that's a good reason to go for it." Yeah. So, and I have a group that I have Odal that's already doing it, and I think the dean's office over there should be starting probably after the first of the year, because it is a bit of an undertaking. Somebody has to help get every person to take the quiz. That takes some effort. And then we do all this auditing, and there's a person who has to help communicate to their people. So I communicate with their energy champion rather than with all of the staff members, and that helps. It especially helps if there's top-down support to do it. But it's really, it's a 30 seconds at the end of your day. It's a 10-minute, 15-minute training and quiz. Before COVID, I would get together with departments and I would have 2 or 3 meetings so that I could talk to everybody. Now I just get on Zoom or Teams and I film a little quick piece that's specific to their building and I send it out via email. And then they can watch it at their leisure. And, it's not so, I don't have to work so hard to get everybody and to treat, everybody has the same chance to see it. The one thing I haven't figured out how to do is caption that thing. I know how to do it on TikTok and stuff, but I can't quite figure out how to do it on Zoom. I know there's a way to do it. I'm looking for the technology class for that because I would like it to be a little more, I don't want to send it out and it not be as inclusive as possible because everybody has the ability to participate.
Can it be revoked?
You can just fail to earn it the next year.
So it's a once a year thing.
Well, so to get it again the next year, you have to have finished it 3 times. You have to get 3 passing audits during the year prior. So the first time you get awarded based on 1 passed audit, but to keep it, you have to keep on going. And I will be real honest with COVID, all of my places are re-kicking off because people weren't here to participate. And we have different levels of technology, especially at the start of COVID. The technology in offices and that staff have access to now, I think, is a lot more similar because COVID really pushed us to make sure they had the tools and the resources they needed to function wherever we needed them to. So I think that seems to be a lot more consistent from place to place, which actually helps. But when we went into COVID, you left, you didn't know when you were coming back, and we didn't know, some of them needed to remote into their actual computer, and we had no way of figuring that out. So it didn't make any sense to keep on. So yeah, we're just re-kicking off everybody at this point.
While we were off campus, while most of us were off campus for COVID, were there much savings? Or were we doing other things? Yes.
Well, there was kind of two things going on. We didn't spend as much money as I expected, but because when this first started, we didn't know the exact science of what was going on. Like how, we were still figuring out how transmission happened, how it, moved through the air, all that stuff. So early on, we ran it, 2 hours before and after, which is extra. We might run it 2 hours before, but we didn't normally run it 2 hours after. But we were kind of flushing the buildings and things. Some of them actually cost more empty. They're not designed to be empty. So there's that. Some of them saved a lot of money because they were empty, even though they were running maybe more. And it was just differences. We still kept auditing and paying attention and doing what we needed to do, but with no one here, in some spaces were really vacant. Whitehurst still was pretty occupied, of my buildings. FM was still coming to work in various iterations. After a while, Stephen and I would trade off days so that we could be in the office for the day, just because it was better internet. And we were really tired of fighting the internet, because in Perkins, when everybody went home, Perkins didn't have enough bandwidth. So some days I had a really hard time doing what I needed to do. A lot of times I just kind of shifted. I would get up earlier and then I would come back to it in the evening and I'd make it work. But it wasn't, that was a problem too. So it was kind of nice to be able to come to campus. Our office suite is fairly big. So we would just trade off. Casey would be there some. But campus was different, and every building did different things based on how they're designed and what kept going on. Different buildings got reoccupied at different times and in different ways. It's just now that their trend lines in the data are starting to look like pre-COVID. It's taken a long time. And some of them, I don't know that they ever will. There are places in athletics that have totally changed how they go about doing things because COVID allowed them the opportunity to discover some better processes, like how the team might run practice or when the team comes and goes or that kind of things. And it's actually benefited them from an energy standpoint.
So a positive
there. But it's just very, energy conservation was kind of the secondary. Trying to do what we could do to keep people safe was obviously the first priority. And when you didn't have the information, you erred always on the side of caution. Because, we have to keep our students, our staff, our faculty, we have to do what we can do. And so that's what happened.
It's been a busy 15 years, hasn't it?
It has. It never stops.
So if you're doing 70 or 80 hours when you're beginning, are you down to a 40-hour work week now?
A couple years ago, Casey and I especially made very conscious decisions that unless there was a really good reason, we were keeping track of our hours and we were done at 40. Because we were burned out, we were tired. And you could work 80 hours a week forever. There's always something to do. There's always things that can be done. So we had to really make some choices and be like, I'm okay with the fact that maybe this is taking me 3 weeks to get done rather than 1, or not everything is the highest priority. I can get to this next week and it still be okay, but I need some better balance. So we kind of went down to, 50 hours a week for a while. And then, we're really certain at pretty well 40. Most weeks I have 40 hours by sometime on Friday, and I just whatever time that is.
Probably good to go.
Yeah, I don't like it when I have to work the whole day on Friday anymore. I've gotten in the habit of having that to go run errands and do things. And, normally I work all of it. I have that time. So,
Well, if you know like an extreme weather event is coming, do you approach that any differently?
oh yeah, we pay really close attention to especially really cold weather or ice storms, that kind of thing. Based on what it is, based on the duration, there are times when we will turn all the buildings on 24/7 to just protect them. And our units do have in their programming, if we turn them off and it turns really cold that night and the building gets cold, once a sensor reaches, say, 55 degrees, it's going to turn the heat back on for a little while and heat it back up. Or say, it's 110 and it only got to 95 that night. Rather than let the building be 95 degrees and have to cool it all the way down, it'll go like, oh, we're like 83. It needs to cool back down a little bit. So it has that technology. But when it's super cold, we tend to turn things all the way on. It's really more, yes, we're not saving energy, but we're protecting infrastructure in the buildings. A frozen coil can damage a lot. So that it can negate any savings we might have had. But more importantly, it makes it harder to educate our students, for our staff to come to work if things are really broken. And we don't want that to happen. That negates the whole point. So, we'll make some tough calls, and we have the ability to either override it on or schedule it on. And even then, sometimes they'll trip off because of the way the wind blows on certain sensors, and we'll have to send people to check them. And that kind of, yes, if the unit trips off, the hot water valve should open wide open, so it'll protect the coils in the unit. But as soon as it's safe, we'll usually send somebody to go physically turn the unit back on so that it's better protection. But keeping them on that long gives us a better chance of keeping everything on and everything protected.
So it's usually you guys that figure out that there's a problem, and then you have to pass that on to someone else to go check it out and see what the problem is.
Yeah, so we say that we know a lot of things and we look at a lot of things, but we don't typically touch a lot of things. So like if I'm going into somebody's office, I'm not touching the things on their desk and messing with their stuff. That's not going to happen. If their computer's on, it's on when they come back. I might turn off a light, but past that, I'm not turning things off. That also means we don't turn wrenches or push too many buttons on these big machines. That's somebody else's job, and they know how to do it correctly, and they know how to do things if some part of it doesn't work. In a way, like I might know all the parts, I know how it's supposed to work, but I don't know how to put it together. So it's better to call in those technical experts. And at least for us, we have a really great team with the automation controls group that's super knowledgeable and super capable and can really handle big things. So they do a really great job. And we have others in FM that also, but they're kind of our first line to call in. Can you get the unit restarted? Can you figure out why it's being weird? It's doing this and this. And I might not know exactly why it's doing, I might have a suspicion, but I'm also very careful not to to tell them what's wrong and shade what they're looking for, because if I'm wrong and they may not find it. And because they were only looking for what I told them. So I really try really hard to trust that they're gonna figure it out. And usually they figure it out very quickly and handle it great.
So after 15 years, the relationship and respect has evened out?
Yes, it really has. I mean, it also helped with AS Control System Group. automation systems group. It's had like 3 names in 15 years, coming under our same supervisor. So our missions lined up better. But even within the larger FM, I mean, people know us. They know we're not there to create problems or work against them. And we're not there to point fingers. And that doesn't do anybody good. And nobody does anything on purpose. It's not like they're maliciously breaking something. They're not doing that. So why does it? So we work really hard to ensure that the relationships are respectful, and that we recognize that all of these people who work in these positions, they're technical experts in their field. They know things we don't know. They know, they have the ability to diagnose past where we do. Our job isn't to do their job. Our job is to work with them, to point things out. So we do a lot of that, but we stay in our own wheelhouse too. And but that's one of the great things is, if I need a plumber, an electrician, I have I have great people I can go talk to and say, this is really weird. I don't understand why it's doing X, Y, and Z. Can you look at this? I mean, and they will, and they can figure it out in a way that might take me, I'm not an electrician. I don't have a journeyman's license. I've had them look at it and go, oh yeah, well that's that. You need to turn in a work order that says, so that I can go fix that. It would have never been that fast for me. So being able to reach out and touch an expert is a great asset.
It sounds like, though, too, you learn their lingo as well as your own lingo so that the communication can occur. Yeah, and that's part of our job. We do a lot of interpreting between those in the buildings and the technical people, just because that's a good way to keep things flowing, and it helps smooth out issues, especially when they don't understand. People don't understand how chilled water or steam work. They don't have that in their home. They don't have VAV units, and they don't have, air compressors running parts of their system. They don't have that. They don't have any reason to understand it. But in the technical experts world, they're going to explain it in that way. I've had people say, he said da 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 da, and I'll write back and say, that just means he fixed it. It's fixed. So you understand.
He fixed the heat. Yeah, I mean, I've had to learn all of that. But that's part of the relationship building, and send the email back and say, they fixed the heat. They don't need to know that they replaced 3 actuators and worked on programming. They don't care. It doesn't matter. They just need to know the heat's fixed. What they get in their email from the tech will say, I did all these very technical things. They don't know. I've had them send it to me and say, I don't know if that's fixed. Yes, it's fixed.
So you have to know that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to interpret what they send to
and I
you.
have to be willing to constantly learn.
That was my next question. Do you go to bed at night thinking, I need to read a chapter in this or check on that?
No, not anymore. But I mean,
there has been times.
There has been times. I still, though, I keep a notepad by my bed because I want to be able to say, I had this idea or this thing I needed to work through, or I need to talk to so-and-so. If I wake up at 3 a.m, I don't want to keep worrying about it. So I do write those things down. But, now it's more like playing with the problem. I have knowledge. Who do I need to talk to? How do I ask them to do, to look at this where they're looking for the thing that I'm seeing? How do I turn this, it's weird, into something that's tangible and meaningful so that they have something to work with? That kind of thing, that will stick with me sometimes. A lot of times it's just something I didn't get on my to-do list. That sticks with me a lot because I'll think, oh, I need to do that. during the day, and I won't be where I can write it down. And it's like, I forgot all about that. That's got to get done too. That can't be forgotten. I need to let so-and-so know this.
I mean, after 15 years, I guess you've got some of this down pat.
I hope so, but I'm still learning all the time.
What's going to happen for the next 15 years?
Oh, there's some really neat technologies and ideas out there.
I mean, wind's been part of the picture for almost 10 years.
It has, and I think we'll move further into all of the above energy idea, and we'll start working, I'm hoping, and I think we will, more toward a net zero idea, which is, really getting our carbon footprint down to zero, which that all of the above energy idea helps a lot with that. Oklahoma's really well placed for that kind of idea. We have wind, we have solar, we have hydroelectric, we have a lot of opportunities. I think we will also move more toward microgrid and smaller generation. So I think it will be a very exciting day when our parking garages have solar panels over the top of them. Our flat roof buildings have solar panels. I think that'll be a really big deal. We have a lot of smart city technologies that you're seeing in Europe, in Seattle, those kind of places that manage things like traffic flow in real time, or they manage utility flow through the building, through the city in real time. And I think OSU could really benefit from those kinds of ideas. I mean, think of what could happen on a game day or a bad weather event. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to both conserve energy and then also create a more efficient, handling of stuff. I also think how we learn and how we go to college will look different in 15 years. We learned from COVID that students can really learn anywhere if they choose to. Some of them more successfully than others, but I think younger and younger students are really learning how to effectively learn in the digital world. Not to say that in-person classes are going to go away, but I think they'll look a lot more like a hybrid course where we have a little in person and we have a little online. Textbooks look a lot different. There's a lot more digital content that has things like videos available and animations of concepts rather than drawings that are, my son's chemistry text had amazing things with it. I could have learned chemistry so much easier with the animations because the drawings I had didn't make sense, but the animations made so much more sense. So we're going to have, I think, more opportunities for students to learn in different ways. So what resources we provide on campus and how that looks and how they are on campus will look very different, I think.
It means the energy output in them is going to be different too then.
It will. I still think the labs will be very energy intensive. I think there will be even more labs. We're an amazing research university that's well placed to do great things. We have some really innovative research that I think as we move forward into the future is going to become even more important. And I think especially with our new president's leadership and her focus on certain areas of research, we will see some different research than we've had on the main campus start happening. And I'm kind of excited to see how that is. But I think everything about how we function in 15 years will look a little different. And some of it will look the same. I think we'll kind of hybridize. But yeah, I think how we run buildings, even how we look for problems will look differently. I mean, there's software out there now that can look at a valve and say, oh, now this valve isn't working quite right. You need to go look at it. It's expensive and we're a massive campus. So at some point that will come our way, but we're not quite there yet, technology-wise and ability-wise.
Maybe as each new building comes on and they phase out the old building.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's going to take a while.
It is. It is. But you're seeing new things all the time. I just think the software in general isn't quite there yet. Some universities are doing that kind of thing, but when I talk to my colleagues, they're still buggy. It's not necessarily maybe saving energy, but it's costing them in man hours a little bit. So I think we're just not quite where we need to be with it to say, I want to invest that kind of capital money when we do have systems that do work very well. We don't want to go from something that works very well and that we can maintain very well to something that's buggy and problematic. Yeah, but I think we'll get there. I mean, I see the controls techs add interesting programming into stuff all the time, and take ideas and apply them in novel ways that allows us to better accommodate what's going on campus, better meet our mission, and better make sure the university maintains and meets its. Because we never want to make this a place that is hard, where it's uncomfortable for students to learn. I mean, at the end of the day, our job is to teach the students. So we want to make sure we provide a good learning environment for them.
Well, you've done that over the last 15 years.
We hope so.
When you started this, did you think you'd still be doing it 15 years later?
No, I had given it 5 years, and I expected to be gone.
Gone or you gone?
I expected to be gone. I expected to move on to something else. I didn't know what. I was like, I'll give this 5 years.
So what's kept you at it?
I like the challenge. If I didn't have a new challenge all the time, this would be a really boring job. And I need a puzzle and a challenge and that kind of thing. So yeah, and I like, even if I left the program, I don't know that I would want to leave OSU. I love it here. I love the people here. I love the culture of campus. I love that I know a lot of really great people and get to participate in something that I think is very worthy. I mean, it's a small thing I can do both for the university and for, the world around me, but I think what I do makes an impact. I also believe very strongly that however a student wants to further their education, whether it's a university or whether it's, a career tech or some specialty training, it's very important to help them do that journey, that it helps them in their life, that it helps us as a society. So I think what we do here is worthy. And so that makes it a really great place. I think no one is here I've never run into anybody who's like, I don't want to be here at all. They do tend to choose to be at OSU because they have a passion for whatever it is they're doing, or, for as much as I like what I'm doing, I also love the days I get to work with students, or the days I get to go talk to a faculty member and let them, in all their passion, tell me about their research, or, a day when I can solve a problem and make an office a better place to come every day, or, whatever it is. On my way over today, I told to a parent and a kid how to find where, a building. I want every interaction on campus to be a positive one. And, I don't, when I've had cousins and even when my children come to campus, one thing I can count on is if they ask for help, somebody will help them. And people genuinely want what's best for them. And I like being a part of that.
Well, and your work, what you do is a way of giving back.
Mm-hmm. It's a way of improving things. I mean, we wouldn't have our third generation being here because this wasn't a great place to be. You know, and you know, my dad came here in the 70s, and then I was here in the 2000s. My daughter has a great job and a career she loves. And my youngest came here as a music major and ended up in horticulture because of he took a class on a whim, and the professor amazed him and he loved it and found his passion. And isn't that one of the things we want for the students when they come here?
That's a good reason to have Jen in and let them experience all of these different ones and choose.
He needed to fill a hole, and so he took this elective plant biology class, and I was like, okay, have fun. And about halfway through the semester, he came home and he said, oh, this is it. I said, what do you mean? He said, I love this class. And he went and talked to the professor, and he went and he got a job working with landscape to see if he really liked that kind of work. He loved it. He would have never discovered that without those gen ed, without that elective that he needed to fill a hole. And he had permission from us, encouragement from us to just take the class because it looks interesting. And his advisor didn't dissuade him from that. And, he had changed his major by the end of the semester, and he really is very passionate. And, he's in a group with a bunch of kids that are passionate about this. So, it's an amazing thing.
He has observed you being passionate about what you do too. I would think.
Yeah.
Do they get it? What mom does?
My daughter more than my son. My oldest is an electrician. He's a journeyman. So he works for my husband. But probably Connor gets it better than anybody else just because they get asked questions in this way a lot. And my daughter thinks of it more as an HR function because that's her area.
Oh, it is in a sense, yeah.
It is in a sense, yeah. She's a recruiter for Centos, and they, a lot of the stuff she does and the way she tries to get people, it does seem very similar. I don't know that Lane really understands what I do at all. I started this job when he was 4, somewhere in there. So to him, it's just normal. And I don't know that he cares. It's not his wheelhouse. It's not a plant.
He knows you're home more now than you were back.
Yeah, pretty much. He knows that I'm home more, and that, he participates in so when he worked at landscape every year during Earth Fest on campus, we give away these orange flowers to students. And the first year we just did it to team up with landscape. It was just a new idea. It was something that wasn't a piece of plastic to give away. And he got the privilege of helping grow those last year, which was probably the most exciting part of my job he's ever seen, because he loved getting to participate in that and say he did that. But we give those out to students, and it's the most fun thing I do in my job all year, because students will come and they will get the plants and they will call their friends and they will be so excited about this little orange plant. It's right before Dead Week, right around Easter. And it's just a nice pick-me-up. But it's always so funny to watch all these students grab this plant and they're just so happy with it. And so every year we team up with landscape and they help propagate them and help us get them, it's the best fun.
Good PR.
And yeah, it's a great way to talk to the students. We usually make them answer some kind of quiz question. Last year was really fun. We were in a different location and we would just have large groups of students. And so the quizzes, asking the trivia questions, they would pretty well, before they got to us, would probably get to hear all 20 questions that we had. And they would ask questions about our questions, which was really fun. But students are great. And they would really participate. And just, I loved the guys going, yeah, I'm going to take this to my girlfriend. Or the student who was like, I'm going to set this in my window while I study. Or, you know, it's really brightened my day to day. Or how do I take care of this? I love plants. And, on the label, we have worked with landscape to get really good directions on what to do. The one thing we had to add in there is they're not allowed to plant them on campus in the ground. We don't need them planting in landscapes gardens. Because I've had a few ask about, can I just plant it in front of the res hall? No. You can't do that. There's irrigation lines there, and no. But you can take it home to your mom and plant it in your yard, and it'll live. But yeah, they have so much fun with those. But it gives us an opportunity to really highlight the things we want them to do, let them know we exist. Because it's hard with everything else to let them know that, hey, there's this whole program that exists, and we're doing all these things behind the scenes all the time. And it also, lets them be engaged. We find, I've had students who are very passionate, not know we exist, and then a year later they're working with the sustainability coordinator very happily and excitedly. So that's a really interesting thing. And students are inquisitive. They'll ask great questions.
I'm thinking that's a good go for your going green for a brighter orange if you're giving them an orange flower.
Yeah.
It ties
into our marketing. It ties into, OSU in general. And the plant, the Cassandra, is the plant. Landscape plants out on campus. They get a little bitty Cassandra, but the ones out on campus can get massive and big, and you'll see these big orange, over by Union, over by Noble. I've seen them. They'll be in different places, but they put them out on campus. That was part of the reason they picked them, is that they're very good on campus.
They have to be planted every year, or they come back.
They are supposed to have to be planted every year, but I've managed to get them to live out in my front bed at my home over winter, but it had to be a mild winter, and they had to be pretty close to the house. So yeah, but the year we had the 10 days below freezing, yeah, they were done. Nothing lived. I had to redo my whole garden, so they had no chance. But yeah, and I don't know what really happens to them later, but they brought them some joy in a stressful time.
It did.
And it gave us a chance to do some education and some connecting in a way that was very positive and wasn't this boring handout line. They really wanted the item we're handing them, and they were really interested in why we were doing it. So that's always good.
As we have covered things on my list as we wrap up. I was supposed to ask you about legislation. It had something to do with legislation.
Oh, I got loaned out to the state capitol for a year back when Oklahoma passed a law about saving 20% by 2020. It didn't really come into fruition because we changed governors. You know how that works. But I got to participate in really the state of Oklahoma's push to create an energy program across the state in all the state facilities. And it was successful. Some places really did reach the 20%. Everywhere got more efficient to some degree because it empowered them to deal with issues and problems in their buildings and to pay attention to it. But my job was to go there and help set up the database. So I worked with a lot of state entities to do that. Officed out of OMES, which is Enterprise Services for the state, which is kind of like Joe Weaver's area here on campus. Kind of that's the equivalent. But yeah, I got loaned out for a year, and that was a lot of fun. There are so many neat people across the state, and I don't think people realize how many different things that the state does. But yeah, we worked on that, and spent quite a while, not just building the database, but where do you start? I remember having that conversation over and over again. Where do I even start? You start by figuring out where you're at. That's the first thing. And worked with that. And I still have some great contacts who some of them have become, ended up with real energy managers working for them, and some of them are handling it themselves. But some great contacts and I have some great colleagues that I use to spitball ideas like, what do you think? How, if I did this, what would happen? Or I've got X, Y, and Z going on. What do you think is the problem? Because I haven't figured it out yet, and those colleagues being able to talk about those things, or they used a really new software technology or new type of equipment. Well, how did that work? What was the problems with that? So that's been one of the greatest advantages of that. And just a better understanding of how our government works in reality versus what's on paper. I mean, it does the things on paper, but it's a lot more, I think, complex than people realize. And there's a lot more things that drive how it functions. Just putting up a website required a lot of not just getting the information there, but making sure it met all of the ADA standards, that it met all the government standards, that it met all the federal government standards, there were so many things they had to meet. So when we hear that something's taking a long time or is difficult, well, there's reasons. And we might want to get rid of the bureaucracy, but some of that stuff's really there for good reasons. It's to make sure we all can participate. It's the same reason that I need to figure out how to get the Zoom recordings to have closed captioning, because I want to be as inclusive as possible and make sure that everyone can participate however they can participate. So, that was really good. But every major entity in the state of Oklahoma worked on reducing their energy. So that was really exciting to get to do that and participate in that.
Did OSU meet the 20% by 2020?
Some of the campuses did. We made about 18%. But with our growth and the 20 by 2020 baseline was newer, was after our program had started. So trying to reach an additional 20% as a non-capital program, we knew going in we probably weren't going to reach it on this campus just because there is no way we had the millions and millions of dollars to invest to get to that next step. Because no matter how empowered people are, if the equipment is inefficient, doesn't matter how great you run it if the equipment's, and when an air handler replacement is $1 million or $2 million or $500,000, it's not simple. There's a lot of infrastructure on this campus, from the roads to the sewer system to the sidewalks, to the lights in the building, to the carpets, the walls. All of that stuff costs money. So, and there's a lot of competing things that have to occur. So we did well, but we knew going in we wouldn't, because we had already done so much, we wouldn't meet the 20%. There just wasn't a good way.
18% is good.
Yeah,
great.
It was great. Yeah. Some of the campuses really did meet it though,
because they hadn't done as much preliminary work.
They hadn't done as much preliminary work, or they have OSU IT. Stan is the energy manager there, and he had more because it's such a smaller campus. He did things like he added programmable thermostats all over the place, which had a huge impact. He had a whole boiler program. He worked with his utility provider on projects that, OG&E couldn't work with us on. It's just too big. OG&E works on other massive infrastructure things with us that are very important, but maybe they're not working with those load things per se. So he had some real opportunities just because of their size and because of how the buildings were designed. They don't have a lot of control systems. So adding a programmable thermostat made a huge difference to their building. And so he was able to keep on making a lot of progress in very real ways, very impressive ways. They've done a great job.
Well, you all have done a very good job too. I'm surprised that other places haven't tried to pull you all, away. Or they probably have, and you said no.
Yeah, I've had a few offers, but I really don't want to leave this part of the country. And like I said, I don't really want to leave OSU, even if I left the program. I don't know that I really want to leave the program. Some days I do, but I think everybody has those moments, right?
Everybody does, yes. You've done great, I think. And most people don't know even that you all are this. I mean,
they only know when there's a problem.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've been learning as I've been preparing for this, and I didn't know a lot of this thing. Okay, my last question is, we can go two ways with this. You can tell me how you want to be remembered, or you can tell me a highlight or two of your last 15 years.
I would just like to be remembered as making a positive impact on the world around me, on the campus, on the student, how we take care of our students, and just leaving the university a better place than when I got here. That's my hope.
Mission accomplished already.
I hope so.
Okay, well, thank you for spending this afternoon with me. It's been great.
Oh, this has been really good. We really appreciate being able to document this a little bit because we feel lost sometimes.
Yes.
We don't want to be a focal point most of the time, but once in a while it's like, we really are here.
Well, it's been 15 years and a decade of excellence.
Yeah, we did a decade of excellence. Yeah.
About that, now we're working on 2 decades.
Yeah, we are. So, yeah, this was great.